Good evening, and thank you for being with us this evening in our fourth Thursday Stewardship webinar series. We've been meeting since February to talk about different aspects of fundraising and get you all ready for the best campaign that you can run this fall. And we've covered all kinds of topics and all kinds of ideas together. Thanks for sticking with it. Thanks also for asking questions and providing stories. As we're moving through, it gives so much more context to this work, and then we can have a real conversation. So I appreciate it. We'll be talking about how to create materials, case statements, brochures, website forms, things like that that entice people, that tell your story, that help people be inspired to give their best gift to your church. We'll also be, so that's what we're covering this evening. Our learning objectives, we're going to talk about what is a case for support. For those of you who have done capital campaigns, you know this very well, that you need to have a case for your campaign to describe in as much detail as you can why you're raising money, what it's going to, what the methods for giving are. This helps people become comfortable with the idea. So we do this for stewardship as well. People should know why they're making their gift, what it's going for, why it's important, why we need them to pledge. So doing a case for support of some kind is something that is a best practice for a stewardship campaign. We're going to be talking about generational differences in donor engagement. This is really about looking at the different generations that are alive today, how they receive information, how they process information, how generous they are, and how they make their gifts. We'll talk a little bit about that so that you can make little tweaks to your campaign or to your asks as you go through, depending on what age people fall into and what you know about them. We're going to be talking about really what goes into a case for support. How do you craft it? What materials do you need to gather together? And then we're going to talk about the craft, the design. How do we make it ready? How do we design language that makes sense? We do all that in 90 minutes. Welcome. A case for support, it tells your story in order to connect your members to your mission and vision and to build commitments to your goals. So the idea here is that you move people through a process of getting acquainted with the community, learning what you do in the world, learning how they can be a part of it, and why their gift particularly has impact in your giving. A lot of times, especially for those of us who might make more modest gifts, we think, well, what does it matter? My gift, does it matter to the church? Yes, it does. And when we can describe what the impact of our gifts are in the community, external and internal, then we really can reach everyone and help people understand why their gift matters and why they need to be a part of our campaign. It all starts with a plan, as many good things do. If you have a strategic plan and it's been a consultant maybe or a vestry retreat worked on it and it's been sitting on a shelf or in a computer file gathering dust, it might be time to take a look at it. Look at those things that when it was last updated that mattered to the community. If it needs to be touched, if it needs to be updated, start that work, do that work. Because if you have a roadmap of what you want to accomplish, you can then learn how to ask people to participate in it. Maybe you don't have a strategic plan yet and you're not quite ready to do all that work. Well, so around a group that may include your vestry, that may include your key stakeholders, people who have been members for a long time, your largest donors, your newest donors, your longtime members, invite them into a process and help you understand what your goals for ministry might be. You probably have some ideas too. Know and be able to describe the measurable impact that your ministries have in your community, internal and external. And this is really important, and you've heard this before in other months when we've met and talked about this work. I think as a church, we do such a terrible job at telling our story, at telling the world what we do and how we do it and why we do it. And that's not just the world at large. We don't even tell our members, celebrate the great things that we're doing in our own community. Maybe we do, maybe your church is that exception, but not all of us are really good at it. So we need to know how to gather measurable impact. It's great to say we feed people, but it's better to say how many people we feed and where they live and why they need access to food. It's great to say how many kids we tutor, but it's better to say why we do this work, why it matters to us, how we got started in it. Tell some story and help people connect with it. This is how we measure impact and help people come along for the ride. And then we want to, there should be some aspiration in a case statement. So describe what you're doing, give a roadmap for the future or how people can participate, and some aspirational thinking. We'd really like to do this. If we grew our fundraising, this is what we could do. We're really hoping to add this ministry or this position or this office to our work this year. Help people understand how they can be a part of something new while contributing to something familiar as well. Your case should remind people and your members why their gifts are important by reminding them what impact they have. So when you give $100, where does that go? Does that go into the liturgy? Does that go into staff salaries? Does that go into feeding people? Does that go into outreach in your neighborhood? If you have breakdowns of that, if you know how much you spend on these ministries, tell people that and calculate for every dollar, this is what goes into it. 35 cents are spent on outreach. If you come up with tools like that, help people understand how they give impact, how their gift changes the world. This is a really important tool in making the case. Your case should motivate people. It should make them excited to be a part of it and make them want to make their best gift, because it's not just keeping the doors open and the lights on, but it's about being in this place and serving the people of God and serving the people of God who haven't yet been identified, who need to come in, who we need to reach out to, who need our services, whatever those are. And then your case becomes your talking points. You take those things and you then reshuffle them in your social media, in your website, in your newsletter. Each of these areas can become articles for your newsletter or a little post on your Facebook page with a picture. You know, you can start to break up your case and talk about it in its elements, and you have lots of content for your social media channels and for your newsletter and for your bulletin announcements. Always be talking about what you're doing and how you're doing it. We're going to talk later about specifically how you craft your statement, but one of the things early on I want to get across is that we should have a process for it. And the first process is that we should draft it. We shouldn't go home, assign one person the job of writing down all of our great ideas and formatting it into some complex structure and then sending it off to the printer. We should have a draft copy, circulate that draft copy, edit it, red pen it, change it, move it around, and test it. This is an element, it adds maybe a couple of weeks to your process. And I know sometimes we just need to get the thing done and get our campaign started. I certainly have felt that before. But when we take that extra time to test our case and pick a sample, not just your vestry, but other people, key stakeholders, if you will, in your congregation, people who might give you really valuable input on how they receive your case and how they're motivated by it. If something's falling flat, if they don't understand something, they can tell you that so that before it goes off to print or before you send it out and build your campaign on it, you can have some real honest feedback. Please take the 2 weeks, to test this with a committee or a focus group, or however you want to do that, virtually, in person, send it by email, do a little testing. Then refine it, take those changes to heart, and make it great. So really don't forget the testing. Later, we're going to talk about words to use and how to involve pictures. But in this part, I just really want to emphasize, have a process for your case. You might find that you have multiple messaging tracks or cases that you need to make within your fundraising campaign. And this is what I'm trying to say here, is that we shouldn't have a one size fits all. Here's what we do at our church. I hope it appeals to you and that you give lots of money. We should be able to juggle and reframe our case depending on who we're talking to and how we're talking to them about it and what we want from them. So newcomers might need an extra letter attached to their brochure that talks about why the Episcopal Church pledges, what an average gift size is, what the process is like, what happens when you don't pledge, and how the budget is created. Some language about that. Do our newcomers need specific information or an invitation into learning how we fundraise? They're coming from some traditions. Other traditions, they definitely need to know why the Episcopal Church does things the way it does. We're going to talk in a minute about different generations and how they're motivated differently. And so that's something to be aware of. We're going to be talking about if you apply for outside grant funding from community foundations, from retail. Many large retail stores have some community support money that they might give to a particular outreach program at your church. You might not get a lot from it. It might be $500 or $1,000 from Starbucks or Safeway or something like that. But hey, that's money. That's money for your ministry. And so if there's something you need to do about your case and a way you can frame it, excuse me, talking about how many members go and what they're doing in the community and what civic clubs they're a part of and how well connected they are. These are things that outside agencies, or if you do any community support or family foundations, I know there aren't a lot of them that give to religious causes, but those few that do, we should have something. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, something simple we can send out. Often these are one-page letters that they want, and really simple. So we should be thinking about that as we're creating our cases. I'm not suggesting that you create 17 different brochures and have them all ready and ready for every situation. More what I'm trying to suggest here is that the way we talk about fundraising is donor-centric. It's not church-centric. For years, decades, centuries, let's say, the Episcopal Church has said, we take checks and cash through the plate, and we really appreciate you, thank you. But there are lots of ways that people want to engage with us, ways that they need, that we need to change our message in order to appeal to them. And it's not the same situation that it was in our grandparents' days and our great-grandparents' days. Things have changed, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But know that sometimes you need to take your great case statement and massage it for a particular audience or for a particular conversation. So let's talk about these generational differences. Let's first say that we are living in an unprecedented time in which we have more generations alive, active, and giving in church at one time than we've ever had at any time throughout history. We have 5 active generations of people who are making gifts at all levels, just starting, just finishing, right in the middle of family raising and career building. We have, so they don't all receive messaging the same way. and they don't all have the same priorities about church giving that I might have or that you might have. So let's take a look at each generation really broadly and talk about some statistics. The statistics that I'm going to quote come from the Lake Institute of Faith, which is an institute out of the Indiana Lilly School of Philanthropy. And they have a great program, one of the only programs that offers master's work in fundraising and philanthropy. And they have an institute just dedicated to faith-based giving, which is important because it's the largest sector of giving in America. 38% of gifts are faith-based gifts. They have an institute on it, and they've done a lot of research. They've done a lot of the research for us. I have a complete copy of that report in my office in Dow House. It's really thick. Should you ever want to take a look at it, I can send it on over for a big cup of tea and a midnight read. But it's fascinating what they've learned and what they've uncovered. We're just going to talk about some generational differences that they bring up. So let's talk about our oldest generation, what we call the matures. They were born in 1945 and earlier. As a whole, universally, so we're not just talking about the Episcopal Church, but universally, this generation gives to church. They have been raised that way. They're comfortable with it. 60% give generous donations to their church, and 51% of them volunteer. We look around our coffee hour or at the other programs that we run in our churches, and we see this generation very active, still showing up, still doing the work. They might not be able to move tables as quickly as they used to, but they're still doing this work, and it's really important and beautiful work. They're most interested in supporting the institution. And this is a general statement. This isn't specific, and it doesn't mean that everyone in this generation does it the same way. But what this is to say is that they trust institution more than the other generations we'll be talking about. If the institution asks, they give. And this is because they are used to the church being there for them, and they want to see the church continue to be there. Pastoral care is deeply important to this generation, and they should be asked for planned gifts. For capital gifts. If you haven't asked this generation yet to make a planned gift and to talk about their estate plans, it's time. It's time to ask this generation before it's too late, to talk with them about how they might like to support the church and other charities and do great work in the world and support their families and their children and provide life for all kinds of institutions, right? Capital gifts, this generation cares about the institution and, and the church building. So ask them for capital giving. They will make generous gifts, often out of retirement savings, but they can do that and they have the assets to give. And they're still making generous annual pledges. Larry has asked me if I have a definition for generously. So there isn't a number amount about what generous is. What it means is that I think this generation understands the gift of giving more than some other generations might, which is to say that they make beautiful, inspired gifts. It's not transactional. I'm not saying that other generations are, but I'm saying that this generation really understands the deep, abundant generosity of giving and receiving. Excuse me for the tickle in my throat tonight. You can't get whatever I have across my screen. Let's talk about the boomers. Let's talk about our baby boomers, folks who were born between 1946 and 1964. So universally, this group donates to church and volunteers in church, although not quite in the same numbers as their parents or grandparents. So this is important to note. So many of them are used to giving. They've been raised and are still attending churches and are making gifts to church. This generation has seen some institutional failure. They've seen things like Watergate. They might have some questions. They might want to see you open up the books before they decide to make a gift. They might want more information. So when we're thinking about how we're transparent and accountable, what information we include in our case statement, how we share the budget, and how we talk about how our money comes in and goes out, this generation might be particularly interested in knowing that information, data. They care about that in general. They are also, this generation should absolutely be being asked to make planned gifts. They are at the time when they are thinking about their legacy. They are thinking about maybe they are about to retire or have just retired. This is the time for them to be managing their assets and their retirement. If they haven't yet made a planned gift to the church, they can do that. And when we talk about planned gifts, we're not talking about millions of dollars and you have to have a wing named after you. Modest gifts can be planned gifts. They can be as small as a few $1,000s. They can be as large as they can be. They can be remainders of a house or portions of a retirement account, or trusts or annuities, things that generate income over time and still leave a gift to the institution and give a tax advantage now. So there are lots and lots of planned gifts that this generation really starting to think they've planned carefully with their money. They're now in a place where they may be losing their salary and moving into retirement funds. And so how do they manage those? If you aren't talking with them about planned giving, you should be. And we can work with you on that. The diocese has lots of investment and help for you on that. This generation also gives generously to capital campaigns. So they will be able to make wonderful gifts and give great gifts to your capital campaign. They might still be in their highest earning years, and so they have empty nest. Maybe they're just starting with grandchildren, but they have that money to give if they want it, if they want to give it, and if you have a good case for them. So definitely be asking them for capital gifts, and please continue to ask them to make their generous annual gift. The baby boomers are the wealthiest generation ever to have lived. They have amassed an incredible fortune. Unlike their grandparents and the great-grandparents that had massive fortunes and distributed them, the baby boomers won't all leave it directly to their kids. Baby boomers are going to leave it more, yes, to their families, but also to charities and schools. It's going to be a broader distribution at the modest level of giving than it was in previous generations. So another thinking about this, the church should be in line to be thinking about this. Please know that the Sierra Club and the Opera and the Symphony and their school are all asking them to make planned gifts too. So the church should be as well, and we can help you with that. Let's talk about Gen X, the sad lost generation, sandwiched between the baby boomers and the millennials. My generation, 1965 to 1976. So notice the statistics here about involvement in church. So not a whole lot of donations going to church. In general, my generation isn't terribly churched, but they volunteer. So how does that number happen? It's because of the social projects that churches do that allow people to volunteer and not be members that engage this generation. So maybe if there's a food program or a tutoring program or an environmental cleanup day or something, They might show up with their friends and wear a t-shirt and help you with a project and not be a member. Does that mean they couldn't be a donor? No, they could be a donor if you help them understand the impact of what you're doing and ask them to make a gift. They might not make the same kind of gift that a member would make because they're not as invested, but they might make a wonderful gift online, especially. They could make a small online gift or repeat it. So think about this generation who come to volunteer, but may not come to your church to worship or to place their membership. They do that as sort of a first step. They want to see what's going on, test the waters. This generation, even less trusting of institution than the baby boomers. My generation has seen not just the fallout from political scandals, but Enron and WorldCom and CEOs being shackled, and seen the mess in Wall Street. So my generation has seen the ups and downs and doesn't really trust banks or institutions so much. And so sometimes the church falls victim to that demonization of institution, right? Because the church is a big old institution. We have to encounter that and help our Gen X folks see beyond that and see the work that we're doing in community and see the ways they can impact the world. This generation probably not ready to talk about planned gifts yet, although they might surprise you. You never know, but they are definitely in their highest earning years and should be making really wonderful annual gifts. And of course, be making great capital gifts. If you know that you have some members in this generation that are giving you a modest gift, but you know where they work and you know what their salary might be, that's not to say you know what other burdens they might have. But if they're giving the same modest gift that they always give, first of all, come to next month's seminar when we talk about breaking through the pledge plateau. But also, we should be looking at their giving with them. That's not to say we should shine a bright light on them and tell them why they should give until it hurts. But we should gently give the idea that they can increase their giving in proportion to the blessings they've received, to the work that's being done, to their care and commitment for the community that is being funded by their gifts. So we should definitely help them increase their giving. This generation is about to get a lot of money from the baby boomers and from the mature generation. $40 trillion at play in the next 15 years. As I said, not all of it's going to go right to them, but this generation is going to be in the middle of it. They're going to be running the nonprofits that receive this money. They're going to be benefiting from it from inheritance. There's going to be a massive exchange of capital in the next decade and a half, and this generation is kind of right in the middle of it. Our millennials, let's not write them off, because we're going to talk about how generous this group is. They're born between 1977 and 1995. Not a terribly church generation. Not a lot of them give to church. Some of them volunteer. Again, we see that number inversed there, more volunteer than give, because like Gen X, they will come to a social or a outreach thing and help their friends out, maybe test the waters. They are interested in results. They want to see what the church is doing in your community and why does it matter. They will ask you this question: why should I give you my money? And they'll ask it really directly and they'll want a direct answer. Well, here's what we do. Here's how we support the community. Here's where your money goes. And it's not going into things that they can't see or do. Now there's a problem there, right? Because some of the stuff that churches do is invisible, right? Pastoral care, we see it when we need it. The liturgy, we might not understand everything that goes into it, but money needs to be spent on it. And so we have some education to do with this generation, helping them understand that the social work, the outreach that a church community does is fed by the internal life of the church. And those other things that their gifts go for are important as well. They are definitely not trustworthy of institution. So grassroots, small organizations are more important. And so the more you can position your church as embedded in your neighborhood, as impacting your local community, the more interested they will be in seeing you and seeing the work you're doing. If you try to talk about big things like the Anglican Communion or the diocese even, they might not be as interested. But if you talk about we serve the people who live on this block or who live across town or who come in from this neighborhood to access our services, they can start to get behind that because they love and understand grassroots ministry and grassroots organizations. This generation is the largest online donor generation. So if you want gifts from them, they are not going to write you a check. They probably don't have cash. They will have a debit card and they will have a phone to tap and try to shove it at you and wait for you to give them a device that accepts it. You're going to have to find a way for them to make a gift online or mobile using their mobile device that works for you and for them. Or this generation is just not going to participate in our giving. Some of them might, some of them will get pledging and then fulfill their gifts online, but they may not ever pledge. They might just choose to make recurring gifts. This might really frustrate us and frustrate our treasurers who want to see numbers so they can plug them into a budget. And the more time that goes on and the more influence this generation has and the more access to money this generation gets, the more important their giving is going to be. And so the more important it's going to be for us to adapt our systems to be able to accept their gifts in the way they want to give. 84% of this generation donates to nonprofits. So they might not have a lot of money to give. They're early in their careers. We know that they're saddled with massive student loan debt. After the pandemic, they might be saddled with massive medical debts or other debts that go along with it. And they are still in 2020, still making gifts, in 2021, still making gifts online to nonprofits. So it's really important to know that this generation is generous. They might give small gifts, but they give frequently and they give with meaning. Finally, our Generation Z, 1996 and earlier. So this first statistic surprises me so much that by 20 years old, 30% have made a donation to a nonprofit. Other than giving to my church, which I did in, in very small amounts, I was not making gifts to nonprofits when I was in my 20s. Well, maybe my late 20s, not in my early 20s, not at 19 or 18. I can tell you that for sure. This generation is, because they get it. And the social media has made it so easy for them to link their bank card or their bank account to a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe or a Facebook birthday fundraiser or Venmo or PayPal or Cash App or Zelle or any of the tools. This generation has them all, and they will make small gifts to nonprofits when asked. Small gifts might seem small to us, but as we've seen in the last election cycles, small gifts made repeatedly make large gifts. And so now we're talking about real impact and real influence. So again, find your online tools for this generation to participate. They are worried about the world. They are deeply worried about the state of things. And God bless them for it, because I think they are the heart and soul of our world right now. We need them to be idealists. We need them to care for the planet and to care for society and to care for the social issues that will change the world. And they do. And so they want to support institutions that are doing that work. So the work you're doing in environment or in poverty or in areas that talk about the social issues of the day, this generation will be attuned to. So if you're doing immigration reform work, if you're doing LGBTQ outreach, if you're doing environmental cleanups or other sorts of things, this generation will volunteer with you. They might support it. Find the way to get them involved. They might not have a lot of money to give, and they might be spending student loan debt or their parents' money still, but they make 40% of all customers. So they have buying power and they are using it. This is not necessarily a good thing to encourage, because it could lead to many problems down the road, as we know. As someone who dug himself out of his early 20s debt, I know what this generation might be facing one day, right? But they have buying power and they're really using it. And organizations, retail is marketing to these people because they have money. Now, I'm not trying to say that the church should step in and take the money from them, but I'm saying that they have it and they will share it. And if there's a cause that's good, they will support it. And hopefully then build a relationship with the church that sustains them through life. Some final thoughts about appealing to our youngest generations. Show them results. They are motivated. They're not motivated to give just to maintain the status quo. They want to see results. They want to see that you're doing something with the money and that you're changing the world or your little corner of it. Focus on retention. So those recurring gifts, when you make an online gift and you have that option for it to be recurring, establishes a relationship, which at first is transactional and then becomes deeper as time goes on and as you start to exchange stories and conversation about it. So focus on your retention with your younger generations. The number one goal here is to form loyal givers. If we start this process early, as discipleship, as stewardship, we will make lifetime donors of folks who will understand the church and always put the church in their budget. As their budget grows, so will their gifts. Encourage volunteerism, because it is the way in for so many of our younger generations. It's the way that they test to see that the institution actually is doing what it's saying it's going to do. And they can be social about it. They can all wear matching t-shirts and have fun with their friends. Volunteering is a social activity. When churches have volunteer options and volunteer outings, it encourages and increases the kinds of programs that will entice younger generations to get to know you and ultimately, hopefully, support your work. Ultimately, every discipleship and mentoring program needs to help people understand how spirituality impacts their financial decisions. So as you are leading these people deeper into your community, be preaching and talking about how our generosity is influenced by our faith, how we give in gratitude for all the blessings we've received, how giving is relational, that the care and love we have for each other as Christians and as community is manifest in the way we support each other through our gifts. This will create disciples and givers. This is a great thing. I'm going to pull us back into the group and pause for a moment and ask you what questions you have about all of this content before we move into how to put together a case statement and what it looks like. Any questions? Any experience doing this?
Davey, I was a little confused by language in here. a little bit. In the stats, they were talking about, X% give to their church or volunteer at their church. Does the their, because we were also talking about people who are unchurched, and this is church language that I've never understood. So when we talk about their church, do they mean give to a church, any church? Or are we talking about just a subset of the cadre, the generational cadre that is involved in a spiritual institution, and of that, 30% or 50% or 80% give? I got really confused in there.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. The statistic on who gives and who volunteers is of the whole subset of that generation, whether they are churched or not. And then the giving statistics, this is what they're interested in and here's what they're motivated by, are more from a faith-based context. So the first two statistics are about that generation as a whole. So yes, some generations are more churched and more willing to give to a church than others. And then we start to look and count that subset and see what they're motivated by.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks.
Thanks for that clarification. Data is just data until you interpret it and analyze. Has anybody done any of this work on looking at different ways that you maybe you don't do it intentionally, maybe you just do it as a matter of practice? When you talk to people about what your church does, maybe use some language with some folks and different language with others. You ever paid attention to that and wonder or pay attention to what you highlight or what you bring out?
Only because you have taught us to do so, Davey.
Yay.
So it's
Actually,
really good.
One of the really fascinating conversations we haven't broken it down generationally so much, although obviously we think about that, but we do have conversations, maybe once every other year, not it's not on a schedule. And since we don't do an annual campaign kind of pledge drive, it doesn't fit into a schedule in the way, but we have a regular conversation within our church community about what do you think about when you give? We do have an expectation that everybody gives both time and money. And I would say for the most part, except for people who are in real financial distress, everybody does pretty much. But the interesting conversations about, well, why do you give? And what do you think about when you're deciding how much to give? We've really engaged our membership on that. And one of the things I love about the conversation is that somebody like me, who's tithed since she was 15, and just hands it over. And yeah, I'm a boomer. And somebody who really wants the statistics and says, well, what impact are we having? People look at each other like they're speaking Martian. And we have found that it's really, really good to put those groups together and say, don't try to convince each other because there are a million different ways, but to hear people, and particularly people who've never thought about, they're thinking about their gift is what's in my wallet today, or, do I have anything left over in this month, or gosh, who just asked me? We just find that having the conversation gets people thinking who hadn't thought about why give, and then tells them there are a whole lot of different ways of approaching it, but you got to approach it.
Lacey, do you, you say you kind of have a process wherein you engage this every couple of years, some like, what does that look like? How do, like, is that, we have a day and we announce this and people get together, or is it informal, or how does that, it's
The
fascinating.
last couple of times we've done it, we have an adult education hour between our two we used to when we had two liturgies, and we will again when we start having two liturgies again in the fall. But we have an hour between our liturgies that is everybody goes to Sunday school, and we've got an adult formation and we've got a couple of kids things. Everybody just kind of goes out. And periodically, I get myself on the roster to teach the adult forum or to facilitate it. It's not teaching. And I am upfront and say, we're going to talk about the spirituality of money. And one of the things we talk about in that. So it's in the context of adult Sunday school, so adult spiritual formation. And we try to separate it from, and I always say up front, I'm not handing out pledge cards. I'm pretending I don't know, what you give. This is just a conversation about how do we approach generosity. And we use a lot of the language you were using about, generosity and giving and gratitude, but also caring about what the church does with the money.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Melanie, I think I cut you off earlier. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, well, I do have another question.
Yeah.
Given this very strange year that we have had, do you have any suggestions for adapting this year's stewardship materials to the reality that some people won't be back yet? Some people have maybe drifted. Some people are coming and really excited and already getting involved. But a lot of our ministries have been dormant for a while. So our usual thing of this many people fed or this many people touched by XYZ, I've done a lot of sacred ground, so we'll talk about that and other things. But how do we nuance things this year?
I think we're gonna talk about this a little in the next part as well, as we talk about how to put your case together. But your question is really good, because when there are challenges, we should name them and then talk about sort of our aspiration. So you might say, in previous years, we did this and fed this many people, and we took a pause in the pandemic. And with your gifts, because now we're asking people to pledge for 2022, right? So in 2022, we hope that we'll be able to do this. So they're no longer funding 2021. They're funding what we hope to be able to do next year. And so we can begin to cast it in as an aspiration. And we can also say it will take some time to rebuild this. And so we need your gifts, and we need you to roll up your sleeves, and we need your creativity, because we want to get back into this work again. And you might find that people say, we don't want to do that one anymore. So what else could we do?
Right.
And it could be a beautiful new ministry that comes up out of it. And there might be a great conversation to have about that. So when we have these kinds of challenges, and the pandemic certainly has been an occasion of that, but we should cast the aspiration. And we hope to be able to do this. We plan to be doing this again. Like Lacey, we're going to have 2 services again. You talk about the future, because that's what our pledges are about. They're about next year. And even if it's going to be more than next year, you can say, this is the timeline for rebuilding this ministry. And here's our plan to get there. And be able to talk about that. It's really important to name it, to not let it go silent.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Great question. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, it is a great question. And for us at All Saints, there's an interesting dimension that sounds differently than what you said, but at heart is the same thing. And that is that simply paying what we think of as operating expenses gets cut up. And one of the best examples is the flowers on the altar. And that doesn't come out of pledge money. That comes out of people making donations for flowers in memory, in honor of whatever that happens to be. And we realized as we moved back into the church, well, actually, before we moved back into the church as a congregation, but where the actual service was taking place in the sanctuary, we wanted flowers on the altar. And that depleted our flower fund.
Oh, sure.
And so we have, this isn't about 2022, it's about the other half of 2021,
Right.
getting people to understand that, and it in a sense, it sort of looks like Maslow's hierarchy, because you think about flowers as being down at the bottom, and we talk about aspirationalism, but we have to think of the top of the pyramid as we want the flowers. And it's been an interesting message to try to get out to the congregation.
That's fascinating. How are you getting that message out? And how are you enrolling people in that? Are you just asking people to sign up for Sundays from now to the end of the year, or?
Well, we haven't quite figured out how to get, see, we have people on live stream, we have people on Zoom, and we have people in-house. And that's their choice, not our restrictions.
Sure.
But we want to make sure having a sign-up sheet at the back of the church doesn't work for the people online. So
Right.
we're trying to figure out how to hybridize that. So far, we've been very fortunate that we had 2 families on successive weekends. One of them with a very significant wedding anniversary, and the other who brought their 3-day-old baby to church 30 years ago last Sunday. So we had her 30th birthday and their 30th anniversary with All Saints, and we managed to extract a significant contribution to the flower fund from both of those weekends.
Oh, wow. How great.
But it's the key is not how happy I am about having come up with something, but the fact that there are things that have to be funded that aren't, they're operating expenses, but that doesn't come out of pledge money. So
Right.
we've sort of got a whole separate pledge campaign, is getting people to think every year about whose birthday they want to commemorate or whatever. And it's a whole other campaign.
Yeah. I understand that, certainly. I was just looking for an example of a church, and now I can't find it because of course I'm trying to look for it, but I will, that has its rota online. So people can sign up for being a reader, pledging the flowers. We're going to handle hospitality, although our congregation isn't doing that right now.
Thank you
Either-
for saying that, and
Yeah.
for giving me a little boot on the backside that I've got to get that on the list of things to do, is have people we can give online. We have a PayPal account. We've got a link to PayPal with a variable dollar amount, so that part works. But having where we take information from people online isn't there yet. So thanks.
Yeah. Elizabeth Grace must be master at doing that. How do you use software to do that? Do you have a package? Sorry to put you on the spot, Elizabeth.
I just need to unmute. Are you looking at Flower Fund? Is the question specifically about Flower Funds?
Or yeah,
No, I was talking about my one little situation that is representative of some other ones, but it turns into how do we collect whatever we need to. Perfect example. I got an email from somebody that said I've changed my address and there's no place to do it online.
Oh, right. Yeah, we don't have that either. We don't have people who can go into an account of their own and change their address. they need to do that with us in some personal way. And in fact, I would want to know that personally anyway, just because I have my 500 pledgers who I want to know everything about them and what's going on in their lives because I care. But no, we don't have that account kind of a feature. I think some of the church softwares might have that,
Yeah.
but we do hold that, all of our information in Blackbaud Razor's Edge, and we hold it ourselves and
Got
manage
it. Well, I will come up, I'll show you, I'll find the examples of churches that have their Rhoda online, and it's as simple as like a Google sheet. And, you know, there are lots of ways you can do this, low tech, high tech. And it's great to get
Yeah.
people.
We do it, we use Google Groups.
Oh, Google Groups, another good way to do it. Good, thank you. I'm going to move us back into our presentation. We have a half an hour left and some information to still get through, but I will pull us back into this conversation at the end so that we can ask more questions. All right. All right, so let's talk about how we actually make this case statement, what elements go into it, what we need to do. So your case should tell your history and tell some story. It should show your impact in the community. We've talked about this. It should talk about the services you offer, both the worship, but also the services you provide the community. It should absolutely talk about how members can help and how they can give. I have seen absolutely beautifully crafted brochures that have been sent to the printer and nobody remembered to put the address of the church or where they can send a check or things like that. So please don't forget that. Please please make sure that you have all the ways that people can give on your materials and that you've tested them, they work, the links work and all that. And what's your plan to change the world? This is what a good case will do for you. We'll talk about your organizational history, who you serve, what the needs and challenges are, and this gets to Melanie's question a little bit. We'll talk about some evidence of good stewardship. This is for those folks who want to know where's my money going and how is it coming in. We'll talk about your aspirations, your goals for future ministries. All these things can go into a well-organized case statement. Some questions to ask up at the beginning. Let's tell the story of your church. How was it founded? Who were the founding members or families? Some of our churches have very clear, a person started it for this reason. St. Gregory's, for example, two folks had a great idea and had some money and time and they built this great thing. Other communities came out of different sorts of processes. And so what's your story and how did your congregation come to be? Who's your patron? Do you know why they were chosen? If it's a feast or a person, an apostle or a saint, why? Why was that person chosen? Was it closest to when the church was founded, or was there some particular charism that community has that made that idea a part of your story? Why are you in that neighborhood or that community? This is particularly important when we look at some of our urban churches and that there are churches a couple of blocks away from each other. Or if you drive down El Camino Real, there's an Episcopal church about every mile and a half. So why are they there? Why did this church happen in this place for these people? Gather some stories. Learn about your church. Were you a mission of another church or a merger? When did that happen and why? It's great to know these stories. And also, look at the stained glass, the names on the stained glass window. Are there members or names on that are also important people in your city or your community? Is there a story you can tell about people who have supported or attended or been members of your church in the past, civic leaders or business leaders or historically interesting people. The more we know, the more we can cast the history of our church. Now, archivists would love to help you with this, but we don't need 8 or 28 pages on this. We need just a nice succinct statement of our history and how we came to be and why we are who we are, why we're serving this community. It helps lay the foundation. Who are our neighbors? So if you were to look around the buildings or the community or the houses that your churches are near, what's the character? Is it, if you had to give it a name or an adjective, is it up and coming? Is it well established? Is it hardworking? How would you describe your church? Who are the people that are served by your outward focused ministries? Where do they come from? Or why does your church serve them? So if you have a prison outreach, why is this important to you? Is it that you're located near a prison like St. Paul San Rafael as a prison outreach because they're right there? But if you have other programs that might not be as easy to draw the correlation for, why do this? Why does it matter to you? How did you get involved in it? Who are served by your inward focus ministry? So of course the answer is everyone, but do you have special groups? Do you have a college age group or a swinging seniors group? Or do you have, young families with children group? What are the different kinds of social or other groups, book groups, social groups that meet in your church that gather? And of course, do you have support groups that use your space, 12-step or other community-based support organizations, Boy Scout or Girl Scout troops, preschools, things like that? What do your neighbors need from you? One of the things that I think is really beautiful, and it happens in church strategic planning often, is walking the neighborhood and walking through your part of the world, or driving if you're in a place where the distances are larger, and really noticing who's walking on the sidewalk, what kinds of stores are there, what nonprofits serve that community, what services are being offered to the people, what's being advertised on the billboards. That will help you understand some of the character of your community and help you understand if there are ministries you need to develop or ministries that you may have had and are no longer needed by your community because the community has moved on. I say this from my own community, which is Holy Innocents in San Francisco. About 22 years ago, we went through the strategic planning process where we walked the neighborhood, and we came back, a group of us came back complaining about walking down 24th Street in Noe Valley and not being able to get down the sidewalk because of all the strollers. And then we realized that there weren't strollers in front of our church and that maybe we should be doing some outreach to families. And years later, and now we have this amazing, robust children and family service because we walked in our neighborhood and we saw who was there, who was living there, who needed to be served. Your community might do something like this too and get a really good idea of the kinds of ministries you might do. We should have evidence of good stewardship. Transparent and accountable leadership is absolutely essential in our churches. So how can people access the budget? Is it on your website or is it posted on a bulletin board? Do you hand it out in the annual report? Are there copies at the back of the church? How can people see the budget? And where can they ask questions about it? Is the treasurer's email address around? Can people ask questions? Do they know that? What are your fundraising goals? So we've talked about this whole case for support, right? So what are you trying to raise money for? Where does the money go? How are you doing it? Are your vestry meetings open? And are your meeting minutes public? Do you have this someplace where people can access them? I don't know why people would want to go to a vestry meeting, but we always make a point to let people know they're invited. Have fun. But it's important to know that if your bylaws permit it, that vestry meetings could be open and people can show up and learn how the church make decisions. If there is something that you are experiencing as a community or as a church, maybe because of the pandemic, for example, but maybe because of other things happening in your community, a major employer has just pulled up stakes and laid a whole bunch of people off, or there's been some sort of other disturbance in the economic viability in your community. Don't brush this away. Name the challenge that you and the people around you are facing. And if you have a plan, or if you're going to start addressing it, talk about that. Help people understand that the church is going to be working on this. Maybe you don't have the plan yet. Maybe you need to pull people together and ask for great ideas. But the more we ask people for help, the more ideas we'll get and how to solve our problems. Our leadership is forward thinking. So what are our aspirations? What are our goals for the future? Do we want to recruit new members? Do we want to start new ministries? Do we want to build new things? Do we want to strengthen or deepen what we're already doing? Are there staffing or building goals that we need to do? We need to bring our youth minister up to full time. So we might put that in our case statement and say, we're really working toward this goal. It might take a couple of years, but your increased pledges or your participation in this is really essential, and everybody's focused on that. Are there predictable future events? We know the local food bank might be cutting back its support, and so we need to step up our game, or a tutoring program at a school just closed. How can we step in? Or a senior daycare center? Is that something we have any skill in and want to do and have the expertise? As we learn about what's happening in our community, let's see how we can respond to it. Always tell people how they can make their gift. Give them all the options, as many options as you have, and make it really easy. This is, again, going back to donor-centric thinking. We want to make it easy and helpful for people to make a gift to the church. So make sure you have your online giving. Make sure people know the links, the process, what to expect. And sometimes there are little catches. So maybe there's a transaction cost and you're asking your members to cover that transaction cost by flicking another switch in their online form, so that all of the money that they intend can go to the church ministry. If there are special instructions like that, or make sure you have a recurring gift, or otherwise it won't happen. So if you have some instructions on that, make sure people know it. Also make sure that people understand that when they give the money and it disappears immediately from their bank account, it doesn't appear immediately in the church's banking account. That can sometimes be 30 days while companies sort through their transactions, and if they do a transfer into your church, or if they send a check once a month. So your pledge statement might be lagging a month, and so that might make people wonder why I've been giving. Let them know this is all under control. Don't panic. Your online gifts are being registered. We recognize it. You have a receipt. That's what you need. It's all good. So this is really important. Make sure people know how to make gifts. Make sure that you ask people if they are thinking about making a planned gift, if they've included the church in their will, so that they can put that, you can put that right on your pledge card. And this will let you know, oh, okay, Davey's going to leave us something. We can follow up with Davey, or Davey might just say, it'll be a surprise. but at least you've asked and you know, and you can have that conversation. If they want more information about planned giving, you can direct them to the diocese or provide it yourself with your Legacy Society, and we can talk all about that. Our September session is all about reinvigorating your Legacy Society and how to do that work. So make sure you come to that one. So now you have to put all that together in as few pages as possible so that this all makes sense and it's an easy, manageable document. So make your asks specific. You're asking for people to do what? Make a gift to support these ministries with this impact because of these urgent reasons. And make it simple and make it clear. Is there a financial goal? Do you have a percentage? We'd like everybody to consider increasing by 5%, 7%, 15%. Do you have other goals of time and talent? Do you have committees that you need to staff or volunteers that you'd like to raise? Ask for those as well. Who wants to serve on the altar guild? Who wants to arrange flowers? Who wants to be in the choir? Every invitation is a chance for somebody to think, how can I use my skills? I've just been waiting for somebody to ask me to organize books in the library. Whatever it is, there is somebody who wants to do that work. Ask. So here's a little challenge for you. I know that we'll all have longer case statements because we like words and words are important. But if you can craft a case statement that fits on the front and back of a 3x5 card with pictures, you have really done your work at creating quick, impactful language that gives people a sense of who you are and what you're doing in the world and why their gift makes impact. This is an exercise. You may try it. You might try this as one of your pieces of collateral, a little card that you can, if you do your stewardship in a sort of a luncheon or a party, or you want to have a little stack of cards like this, if you can create a 3x5 card that does your whole case, and so this is to size, right? This is 3x5. You are on the right track of getting your message clear enough and impactful enough to help people be inspired to make a gift. We'll have longer ones. You might have a longer one. This is a challenge. And it's also a useful tool because what we want to do is use action words, impact words to help people make their best gift. Pictures are really important. Use them. Use pictures of your church. Not generic pictures like I've used here in this presentation. Use things that are meaningful to you. Show faces with permission. Make sure you get permission. And certainly if there are children, make sure you have permission slips from the parents that say they allow their children's picture to be shown in something that will be handed out or perhaps put on a website. Really just, it's important to do that. Take good pictures of your events. Here are my top 3 least favorite Episcopal pictures. People singing with a bulletin in front of most of their face. Nothing looks as unattractive as an open mouth. So don't do that picture. Don't do a picture of an event where the people are far away and you can't see any like conviviality among them. That's another one of our favorite Episcopal pictures. And my very favorite is the backs of people's head because they're all looking forward at some speaker or presentation that you're trying to capture. Get the other way and show people really engaged and excited. These are simple tools that can help you take really good pictures of your ministry that engage your community and help people understand the story. somebody in your church is a photographer and would love to help you think through this, or works in advertising or in publication and might be great to help you think through how to take good pictures that capture your things. Don't take those bad 3 pictures that I just talked about. Minimize your copy. Use really tight sentences and action-oriented words. This is another great reason to draft and test your case statement before you've done it, so that you can really make it tight. Use that red pen, cut out words, make it concise. Because what you want is for people to be able to take away facts and numbers and ideas and know why they're making their gift to your church. When possible, use metrics, use numbers to tell the story as well. Testimonials, storytelling, very important. If you capture them in your case statement, have a little box that has somebody's picture and a little story about why they're a member and what being at your church means to them, that's great. If it's a video, even better. Videos tell so much more story than static pictures do. And if it's just really great when you can tie those stories to impact. I volunteer in this program and I support the church because we do this work. And this is what it means to me. And this is how long I've been doing it. Those sorts of stories, and you should coach people like, this is what we're going for here. It's really tight, it's really concise. Help people write or give good testimonials. Really important in our storytelling. Begin, continue, and finish all of your fundraising with gratitude, because that's why we do this work. If we lose sight of the gratitude and how it leads to generosity, and we're thinking just about metrics and money, then our case starts to feel transactional and not inspirational. So always inspire, help people remember and connect with the deep abiding gratitude that swirls around them from all of creation. Whatever you do in paper, have an electronic copy, something you can put in an email, something you can upload to a website, something that can be shared easily. This is especially important because we're going to be hybrid again in many of our communities for stewardship this year. So make sure you have electronic materials. Ask people to develop their own pitch about why they support the church. This is different from a testimonial. This is that elevator pitch, right? You have 11 seconds with someone to tell them why something is important. And if you create the kind of case statement that gives concise, precise numbers, you can really help people give that pitch, that elevator pitch, whether they tell it to other people or internalize it themselves. It's a really important process to go through. Some other things you might include with your case statement. Line item budgets are really important, but don't allow your budget to control the conversation about your case. Numbers tell one story, but your case really tells about impact. So make sure you provide that transparency, but don't let it be the only document that they have. Develop really simple pledge cards or calls to action, whether you're doing this in a pledge card or in your online giving form. Make sure that people have a real clear sense of why you're asking them to give, what they're expected to do, and you're not asking them to do too many things. What you want in a pledge card is for somebody to fill in an amount and tell you how often they'll give it and submit it to you. If you ask too many questions on a pledge card, you'll start to bog down the system. This isn't your only chance to communicate with people. You have lots of chances in church to talk to people about how they give, and how they can be a part of your community. And please consider including a narrative budget. What is a narrative budget? So a narrative budget takes your budget and it spreads it out over ministry or mission areas. It takes it and it puts it into categories that help people understand what the true cost of your program is. So you take fixed costs like salaries, utilities, building and ground, insurance, and you spread those out through your liturgy, your youth ministry, your outreach, your pastoral care, however many ministry areas you have. And then you start to understand that it's not just about these big line item budgets like salaries and building, but it's about ministry. Every dollar that you raise is dollars spent on ministry. So this is a really important tool to help you do that. If you go to the TENS website, TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, I will include this link when I send out the slides in the video later to you. It's a great process on how to take your Excel spreadsheet budget and turn it into a narrative budget and what that looks like for you. Make your case compelling. What are your questions? We've got a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure I answer any questions that you have, or share, if you want to share stories about what you are doing or what you have done, that would be great too. Nothing? It's 8:30, and we've talked a lot. What I hope you'll get from this session and from the next session, Breaking Through the Pledge Plateau, these are really both tools on helping us get better about asking for what we need and helping people feel the urgency and the impact of their giving. So these are sort of companion sessions. Anything else to say for the good of the order tonight? Any questions or comments?
I think it's been very helpful for me. I really appreciate it because, you know, we pretty much had assumed at St. Tim's that we would be back in business and up and running here, you know, come pledge campaign, and we have reopened. We are having in-person services, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some folks who are hesitant. We found particularly the younger families with kids, because the kids were at home for 15 months, and I think they just haven't fully re-engaged in, all right, Sunday morning, let's get back out there and, you know, so anyway, so I'm hoping that we can continue at least to plan on having in-person rather than the virtual that we did last year. Not that it wasn't great, but it was a lot of work, and you know, it just wasn't as much fun.
It's not as much fun when you can't do the party that comes with stewardship.
Exactly.
But yeah, we need to care for our community too, and we'll see what the fall brings us.
Right.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Well, friends, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time and appreciate your questions and your wisdom. You have so much to offer. You are experts in your own field and your own congregation, so I really appreciate it. I will upload the video and the slides to the diocesan website. It'll probably be up tomorrow, and then I'll send out an email to y'all and let you know that it's there so you can access it. I really appreciate all you're doing for your church and for the church. Thank you. And
Thanks, Davey.
Thanks, Davey.
So
It was
much.
really great to have such a concrete, lots of stuff to work on. Thanks.
yeah, you bet. This was a
Thank
good
you.
session.
Thanks
Thanks,
so
Greg.
much. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, Elizabeth. Good night.
All right.